The Gothic architect wanted your eye to ascend toward heaven. Drawing your eye upward, that beautiful arch draws your eye up as high as it can possibly go. Because people in the Middle Ages really wanted to build these great castles of the spirit, if you will. And they believed that a cathedral should be a place of comfort, where you could come in from the outside, leaving your cares, your worries, your sins behind, and enter into the presence of God. That's what they were trying to achieve in the Middle Ages, was a convergence of heaven on earth. They wanted to build these great cathedrals to the glory of God, to be, if you will, a city of God here on earth. And so there is, in a sense, a convergence. Man is imperfect, but we are created in God's image. And so we do our best to create these beautiful cathedrals to the glory of God in homage to Him.
But a cathedral is more than an homage to God. It serves a specific purpose. Its name comes from the Greek word cathedra, which means seat. And a cathedral is a church which houses the seat of a bishop. As a center of church power, a cathedral is also a center of learning and inspiration, demanding an awesome architectural presence which matches its importance. In the 12th century, that was best expressed through an innovative new kind of design called Gothic.
Originally, it was a style of architecture that in some minds was thought to be rather bizarre and unusual. Gothic has three basic elements, actually. Number one, rib vaulting. Number two, flying buttresses. And thirdly, and in some ways the most important, the pointed arch.
The concept was a radical departure from early Roman churches, which were small castle-like structures with small windows and massive walls. Instead, a Gothic cathedral began with an ambitious floor plan called a cruciform, resembling the shape of the Christian cross. Because great height would eventually rise from this design, construction efforts began with a solid foundation. Layers of stone blocks set 25 feet into the earth to support the building's great weight. Each block needed to be perfectly level and aligned, or the entire structure could collapse, as was the case in Beauvais, France, where the pieces of a 1284 AD cathedral which fell during construction are a haunting reminder of imperfect masonry. Today, only a section of the building remains, too heavy and cumbersome to be disassembled and rebuilt as intended. It might appear that grand granite pillars are providing a cathedral's structural support, but actually it is the walls which hold the building up. In earlier times, this would necessitate very thick and solid sides, but the Gothic aesthetic demands an innovation never before possible in giant structures. Enormous expanses of glass embedded in the walls to shower the inside with a holy light. Cutting away sections of the stone walls, however, reduced the overall stability of the building. The solution was an ingenious 12th century notion to support or buttress the construction. Traditionally, a building's roof is supported by its walls. In early structures, entrances into a building evolved into arches and load-bearing columns. But as wooden roofs were replaced by fireproof stone ceilings called vaults, walls became thicker to support the increased weight and resist the outward thrust. In a refinement of the principle, the downward weight of the ceiling was directed to specific points over the columns, which were thickened for the additional load. The result was a building which resembled a ribbed skeleton, and it allowed the walls to be opened even farther for larger windows. But as cathedrals grew larger and taller, the structure's weight inside and the force of the wind outside increased. To counteract these two unstable forces without thickening the walls and reducing the size of the windows, additional support was placed outside the interior space. The result was a row of buttresses connected to the walls by stone arms called flying buttresses. Here, the downward thrust of the ceiling pushes against the wall, then travels across the expanse of the flying buttresses and is channeled through the outside buttress columns to the foundation below. Most buttresses are topped by an ornate pinnacle. These festive stone designs are not simply to enhance the beauty of the structure. It is their weight which helps the buttresses perform their task.
You ended up with very thin, very tall, and very thin walls, which were made of stones piled up. So the buttresses stopped the whole building from pushing out and the vault falling.
A vault is the architectural name for the unique ceiling construction of a Gothic cathedral and part of the genius behind its design. First, temporary wooden centerings are mounted on scaffolding. Then cut stones are laid in place from the bottom up and mortared together, though it is their own downward weight which keep them firmly set together. Finally, a keystone completes the assembly, so when the temporary centering are removed, only the stone frame of the ceiling remains. The expanse of the vaulting within the frame begins with a webbing of very lightweight stone mortared together with a layer of wood planking underneath. Once the mortar is set, a 4-inch layer of concrete is poured over the entire area to stabilize the structure. The process is simply repeated until the entire ceiling area has been completed. And because the building and its ceiling are primarily made of stone, there is little chance of fire damage, a primary concern in an age when most secular buildings were made of wood.
I think you could say that it is an act of faith. It has to do with gravity. It has to do with the thrust of weight. When you build a Gothic cathedral, you start at the bottom, laying stone upon stone, course upon course, and then you pray. But as I say, it works.
Using such heavy and ponderous materials in constructions, it seems a miracle that Gothic cathedrals would be homes of holy light. But that was their central and original intent.
We sort of glom on to a date for the beginning of Gothic. We think of the Abbot Suger in France, who redid his abbey in 1130. And he, in many ways, is known as the father of stained glass because he believed that stained glass let in divine light. Natural light coming through colored glass, in a sense, was divine and created sort of a mystery. And so the stained glass windows were very, very important. And coming to a Gothic cathedral is really a visible experience. It's visual. You see, and it is through your sight that you are able to interpret often the meaning of your faith.